The road beyond the city felt hollow, a long, cold strip of asphalt stretching between two forgotten places. He'd been driving all night without a destination, not toward anything, just away from yesterday, away from everything. The highway shimmered under the high beams, slick with oil or moisture or something else that didn't quite belong. The trees lining the road stood perfectly still, their silhouettes too sharp against the pale sky. Somewhere past midnight he saw the figure, a man standing at the edge of the road with his hands in his coat pockets, not hitchhiking, just waiting. That was the strange part. There was no gesture, no thumb in the air, no sign of need or urgency. He looked like someone who had already been told he'd be picked up. The car slowed, not out of fear or kindness, but instinct, the kind of automatic reaction formed after too many long drives alone. The man climbed into the back seat without a word. No questions, no directions, no name offered. Just a quiet presence settling behind him like fog. They drove in silence. The radio had given up hours ago, playing nothing but static and ghost stations. The dashboard lights flickered now and then, but the engine kept going. The night was dense, muffled, like sound didn't carry as far as it should. He checked the rearview mirror once. Nothing. Just the back seat empty. He blinked, glanced again. Still empty. But the presence was there. He could feel it. The faint pressure of breath, the slight creak of the seat as weight shifted. There was no sound, but the sensation was unmistakable. Someone was back there. He told himself it was the mirror. Maybe the angle was off, or the lighting, or fatigue. Maybe he was overtired. It didn't matter. He didn't look again. The man behind him didn't speak often, but when he did, his words were wrong. Not threatening, just personal. Too personal. He made references to places the driver had lived but never talked about. Mentioned memories that hadn't been shared with anyone. Whispered phrases the driver remembered saying, but only in solitude, long ago, in rooms where no one else was present. There was no way he could know any of it. But he did. And the further they drove, the more the road seemed to fade, as if the world behind the windshield was stretching too far, while everything behind the rear view had already disappeared. The road changed as dawn approached, subtly, like a dream forgetting its own shape. Road signs began to blur past, unreadable or blank, some twisted at odd angles, pointing nowhere. The trees grew taller, darker, crowding in like they were following the car, not merely watching it pass. The white lines along the pavement faded until the path ahead became more suggestion than direction. He hadn't seen another car in hours. The presence behind him remained, always there, always silent, always just out of reach. And still the mirror reflected nothing, not even a shadow. The back seat was a void untouched by light or sound. At the next gas station, an old skeletal structure barely lit by a flickering green sign, he pulled over. He stepped out to clear his head, pretending to check the tires. The air smelled metallic like old blood and rusted water. The silence was heavier here, pressing against his ears. No wind, no insects, no passing trucks. When he returned to the car, the back door was already open. The man sat exactly as before. No motion, no emotion, no trace of having moved at all. Except now there was something resting on the seat beside him. A small object wrapped in faded cloth. Square, heavy, ancient. He didn't ask. He didn't want to know. But the weight of it, just knowing it was there, felt like it added something to the car, like gravity had shifted, like the vehicle was no longer entirely his. Back on the road, the GPS failed completely. No signal. The screen turned black and refused to reboot. His phone wouldn't call out. No notifications. No clock. The car's radio now emitted a low, soft hum that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his own heartbeat. The stranger still didn't speak, but somehow his presence grew louder. Memory became unreliable. The driver couldn't remember which state he was in, couldn't recall what day it was. Even the journey's starting point began to dissolve, like the edges of a dream after waking. He began to wonder if he'd ever known where he was going. In the glove compartment, folded neatly and without explanation, he found a map. Hand-drawn, one route, one road. No towns, no turns. Just a single red line ending at a black square marked home. He hadn't put it there. But the passenger behind him, the one who still didn't exist in the mirror, shifted slightly, as if in quiet approval. He followed the map, not because he believed it, but because there was nothing else. The highway had long since lost its shape. The asphalt cracked into strange patterns. The sky darkened without turning to night, and the sun stayed fixed just beyond the trees, as if time had slowed or simply paused to watch. No matter how far he drove, the gas gauge never moved. The road narrowed, then widened again, then splintered into a series of turns that made no sense, yet he always ended up on the same stretch of road. The same tree leaning in, the same empty billboard, the same dark smear across the pavement that looked too much like dried blood to be ignored. He stopped looking at the mirror, not because he forgot, but because it no longer reflected anything at all, not even himself. The object in the back seat remained wrapped. He never touched it, but he could feel its pull. The air grew heavier around it. Sometimes while driving he imagined it humming, or breathing, or watching. Eventually, the trees broke apart and the road led to a clearing. There, nestled in tall grass and dead leaves, stood a house. It didn't appear abandoned, not ruined, just untouched, like it had been waiting in silence. He stepped out. The door of the car didn't creak or slam. It simply closed behind him, final and absolute. The passenger did not exit, but he was no longer in the car either. The key was in the driver's pocket. Old brass, heavy, unnaturally cold. The house accepted the key like it had never been removed. The door opened with a deep, exhaling groan. Inside, dustless air. Dim corridors. Rooms that seemed too large for the shape of the house. Portraits of faces he didn't recognize, but each of them had his eyes. At the center of the house stood a narrow stairwell leading down. He descended without decision, as if gravity had made the choice for him. At the bottom, in a windowless room of stone and ash, sat the man. His coat was gone, his hands folded, his face exactly the same, and yet older now, thinner, like something had hollowed him out. There were other objects down there, dozens, all wrapped in the same faded cloth, all identical in shape and size, neatly arranged in rows like gravestones. There was space for one more, and when he looked again, the last bundle was no longer in the car. It was in his hands. The house did not let him leave. There was no door anymore, no road, no sky, just the silence of someone who had always been coming home, even if he never meant to. He found the app late at night. in that hazy hour when tiredness stops feeling like fatigue and starts tasting like impulse. The name was plain, Link Up, and its description promised long-distance rideshares with vetted profiles and verified reviews. Clean design, no social feed, no unnecessary features. Just you, the road, and someone to split it with. He'd been planning the move out of Portland for weeks, but something about doing it alone made the trip feel heavier. Denver was far, the car wasn't in great shape, and gas wasn't getting cheaper. So he created a profile, posted his route, and within minutes a request came in. The guy's name didn't matter at first. The profile picture showed a forgettable face, neutral expression, neutral clothes, the kind of image that leaves no trace in memory. What stood out was the review history, dozens of trips logged, all 5 stars. No one complained, no one warned. He accepted. They agreed to meet in a gas station parking lot on the edge of the city, early morning. The man was already there when he arrived, standing beside the curb with a small black duffel at his feet. He didn't speak much, just nodded and got in. There was something overly polite about his movements, something practiced, but it didn't seem worth thinking about. The first few hours passed in silence, the way long drives often do. The man didn't ask to change the music, didn't fidget, didn't comment on the weather or the road conditions. He looked out the window like he wasn't really watching anything. It wasn't until they reached the Idaho border that the first strange thing happened. The driver glanced at the rearview mirror, a habit, just muscle memory, and saw the back seat empty. At first he assumed it was a trick of the angle, or maybe his brain skipping a beat from the monotony of the road. But when he turned his head slightly to check, the man was sitting there, exactly where he should be. He told himself not to think about it. Mirrors were weird. The brain got tired. Light could distort. Maybe the mirror was old or warped, but the feeling stayed. He started checking the app again during stops. That's when he noticed something he hadn't seen before. The rider, the one sitting silently in his back seat, had multiple profiles. Same photo, same name, same review history. Dozens of identical accounts, all with the same string of 5-star rides, all created within days of each other. They were requesting rides on the same day, sometimes within the same hour, all across different cities and states. He wasn't the only one who had accepted, and he wasn't sure he was still alone in the car. The second day of driving began with frost on the windshield and the faint ache of not having slept right. They had stopped overnight at a roadside motel to Wind Falls, 2 separate rooms. No conversation, no knocking on doors, no footsteps in the hallway. But in the morning, the driver found his own duffel bag unzipped, though he was certain he hadn't touched it. Nothing missing, just moved like someone had looked, decided it wasn't interesting, and left it open as proof. The man in the back seat didn't react when the car pulled back onto the highway. He was already seated, already waiting, his small black bag resting at his feet again. No dust, no creases on his clothes. It was like he hadn't slept at all. The roads stretched empty and gray. The landscape barely changed. Only the gas gauge and the passing mile markers gave the day any structure. But as the car rolled eastward, the driver noticed something else. The app was still sending requests. New profiles, same photo, same name, slightly altered birth dates. Always 5 stars. It wasn't a glitch. Each request had different locations, different routes, different riders. but the faces all the same. Sometimes the profiles were already marked as completed trips with other drivers. Completed recently, too recently. One review was posted 5 minutes ago by someone hundreds of miles away, praising the same rider currently seated in the back of his own car. He turned off notifications, but it didn't matter. The app still refreshed on its own. More identical profiles. More smiling versions of the same man scattered across the country like echoes out of sync. Later that afternoon, he stopped at a rest area. Empty parking lot, vending machines humming like insects, a single light flickering above the men's room. He left the car running while he went inside. He didn't need to go. He just needed a minute. When he came back, the passenger door was still shut, but the back seat was full. Not with people, with things. Identical black duffel bags stacked neatly. 4 of them. No movement. No sound. Just more bags than should have been there. The man was seated beside them like they'd always been his. The drive continued in silence. When the sun dipped low and the sky bruised purple, the man finally looked up and stared directly into the rearview mirror, eyes meeting the driver's. The mirror somehow still showed an empty seat. That night, the app updated itself. It added a new feature. Repeat ride, Evan Miles. Would you like to ride with him again? The button beneath it pulsed gently. Yes, nitrogen monoxide. There was no option to close it. He didn't press anything. Not yes, not no. He turned off the phone, pulled the battery, left it in the glove box like it was leaking something dangerous. For the rest of the night, he drove without music, without maps, without distraction. The man in the back didn't speak, didn't sleep, didn't move. At some point past midnight, somewhere near the Colorado line, the dashboard clock froze. The gas gauge began to drift. Not drop, not rise, just drift, left to right, right to left, like it had given up trying to guess. The road signs stopped making sense. Cities he'd already passed began to reappear. Twice he saw the same gas station, same dented ice machine, same flickering open sign. He didn't stop again. The duffel bags in the back seat had multiplied. They were all the same size, all zipped tight, but some looked older now, worn, smudged, scuffed like they'd been riding back there for years. The man sat among them, posture unchanged, like he belonged to them, or they to him. By dawn, the highway narrowed into a nameless road that shouldn't have existed. No markers. No mile signs, no turnoffs. Just an endless 2-lane strip cutting through a field of dark, dry grass. The car finally ran out of gas. It didn't sputter. It just stopped, a silent coast to the shoulder, as if it had decided it had seen enough. When he turned around, the man was gone. So were the bags. So was the back seat. Not empty, gone. The space behind the driver's seat was solid metal, like the interior had never been built to carry passengers, like it had always been a single-seater. He got out and opened the rear door anyway. There was a phone lying there, not his, same model, same color, powered on. On the screen, the app had launched again, without prompting. Only one profile was visible now, his own. Same photo. Dozens of 5-star reviews, all posted in the last 24 hours, all from drivers across the country, all saying the same thing. Quiet, respectful, would ride with him again.